Hi, here's a quick video demonstrating the new revenue forecasting functionality. So instead of forecasting every single EVA, we have built a trigger that will create a single revenue forecast transaction line per each month that we have on our project. So if I were to come in real quickly into the revenue forecast transaction, what you'll end up seeing is instead of having a revenue transaction line for every EVA, we're now going to have one revenue forecast transaction line for every month that we have in our project. This is just for the labor revenue for the if I come over here to there's a fixed fee project that has a milestone that is still planned for the milestones, the non-labor revenue. If I look at a forecast transaction, you'll see. Oops, this is wrong period. If I come into this one here, you'll see that we'll get a labor revenue forecast, one for November and one for December, but you'll see that we'll get a milestone forecast for December as well. So I'll show that on the screen in a moment. But first and foremost, let me just quickly review the projects. I've got a fixed fee project. This fixed fee project has one assignment currently that goes through the end of February. There are still 600 hours remaining. I'm forecasting as of November 1st in this example. I've recognized $4,848. So I have $61,000 of revenue that has yet to be recognized, and then $47,000 of that's for the total revenue, but $47,000 of that is labor revenue. So if I were to pull up the revenue forecast screen for this one real quickly, I actually already have it open here. If you look at this forecast, you'll see now there are only two line items underneath the fixed fee project. One representing the labor revenue, and you'll see here again. These are I have a November, a December, a January, and a February revenue amount, and then I have the one milestone that I have on that project as well. So remember, on my fixed fee project, I had that milestone for $14,000 still outstanding that I'm going to bill for. And then, of course, the way it works is that if you were to go and quickly look at the forecast, a report on the EVAs, oops, excuse me, let me just drill into this. This gives you the amount that we currently are showing based on the forecasted hours for each of the EVAs by month. So this represents the EVA amount for each month. Now, it may be different than what we're actually going to recognize in the forecast. So when I look at the actual forecast screen, right here, these amounts represent how much revenue that we'll have recognized, that will cumulatively recognize each month. So this could possibly be a negative number, and it's not necessarily the number based on the hours that we're going to work in that month. It's the amount of revenue that we'll have at the end. If I were to go quickly look and see how what fields we've added to calculate this, if I jump back onto my project, let me go to my project here, and I jump into one of the revenue forecast transactions. In this case, I'll pull up the one I'll go to 2015, and I'll look at the forecast for November. So there are a couple new custom fields that have been added to the revenue forecast transaction line in this section down here. What it does is it calculates the start hours at the start of the period. So in November, we had 80 hours that were actually starting in the period. If you were to look at this project, you would see that we actually have, and I'm forecasting from November, but we actually have 80 hours that have been approved to date. So for the first forecast month, where the actual hours from previous months is going to be the same as the hours that we have at the start of the month. We are forecasting 168 hours in this month, which gives us 248 hours at the end of the month, which means that at the end, if we take the 684 hours that are currently set up as the estimated complete hours, we have 36% complete at the end of November. So you take that 36%, you multiply it by the forecasted, the total labor revenue of $51,000, and that's basically saying that at the end of the forecast period, we'll have $18,000 recognized on the project. Given the fact that I've already recognized $4,848, the difference is $13,954. That represents the revenue that needs to be forecasted in this period. That's the value that will go on the revenue forecast transaction line. That's the percentage, the cumulative percentage we'll have at the end of November. So when I go back to my screen, that's the $13,954. Again, if I look at the December number, for December, what we see, if I come in here, we're working another 184 hours in December. So we're starting December with 248 because that was what the hours were at the end of the November. 80 hours forecasted, the 80 hours of actual prior to November, and then the 168 hours or the 164 hours that we had in November. And then ultimately that gives us the hours at the end of November, gives us a 63.16%. Now the percent complete, the project estimate at complete hours, this is the fixed amount at the time of the forecast. So this stays fixed while we're in the forecast. Now next month when we do our forecast, our project estimate, or next week when we do our forecast, the project estimate at complete hours might be different, but the project estimate at complete hours are the same for every month in the forecast. So we get our 63%, we take that against our labor revenue. That gives us the end of the period of $32,000 of revenue that we should have recognized on the project at the end of the period. So we will have 18,000 hypothetically recognized at the beginning of the period. That means that we'll be recognizing 13,950 in the period. That number is what gets put into the revenue forecast transaction line. And so there's the 13,950. So continuing on, it goes month to month till you run out of the project. What you'll see here now is that the total forecast represents the total amount of revenue labor that we have left, labor revenue that we have left. Down below we have 14,286. This comes from the milestone that we have in the project. All of it, if I select both of these, you'll see that we're forecasting matches the exact amount of revenue that we have remaining on the project. So if I jump back onto that project, you'll see we have $61,000 of total revenue left, $47,000 of labor revenue left, and that's what matches these these numbers. So I think we're good to go. If I just simply go in and change the scheduled hours, on the assignments and then rerun my revenue forecast, everything will shift out when next time you hit generate forecast. So every time you generate a forecast, it creates draft revenue forecast transactions. These draft revenue forecast transactions, will always have their numbers calculated from the trigger that we created to calculate each monthly number. For the time and material project that we have, so we actually have a second project here for time and materials. The difference here is that time and materials projects will use the assignments and the bill rate on the assignment times the scheduled hours in the month. So if I were to go in and look at this report, for instance, the forecast amounts for this report is taking the hours that we're working for each month multiplied by the bill rate. So if I were to actually hit show details here, and I click into Steve Marcus's, let's look at his November EVA record. We'll see that he's got 84 hours forecasted at a forecast bill rate of $250 an hour to give me $21,000. So the sum of all of the monthly forecasts now, when I look at my forecast, what you'll notice here is that there's no folder, because if there was another element that was being forecasted like a milestone, we'd get a folder for the project, and then we'd see the project's labor forecast and the milestone side by side under that folder like we do on the fixed fee project. In this case, there's only one thing being forecasted, and that's just the labor at the time at the project level. So that's why you see it here. But here we see the $22,000. So this is being aggregated month over month. If I go back to this report that I was just showing you, did I not have it here? Hold on, bear with. If I go into this report, you'll notice that if I pull this report out a little bit farther into the next period, you'll see actually that Steve Marcus has two. If I hit show details, he actually has two assignments in the month of January. So there's two EVAs here that come from this number. So he's got 24,000 and 8,000, which added together is 32,000. So if I look at my January number, you'll notice I now have 32,000. So it's aggregating all of the assignments hours up into a single line, whereas before we would have seen EVA records underneath here for every single EVA, for every single person, for every single month. So it's a much cleaner, much more simple interface. Notice here that we only have $101,000 of forecasted amount, which means that there's still $120,000 of unallocated revenue on this project. Where does that come from? It comes from the fact that if I come back onto the time and material project here, oops, wrong project, you'll notice that we've only scheduled $101,000 of revenue. So that means that we have unrecognized 221,000. We've only scheduled 100,000. The difference happens to be that sort of backlog. It happens to be the $120,000 of unallocated revenue. At this point, everything's the same. You can go ahead and you can submit this forecast and then save it and lock it, and it will create a revenue forecast transaction. I'm still updating the forecast snapshot so that going forward we'll have a breakdown of both the forecast in the period, total forecast in the period for labor, and forecast in the period non-labor. That's still forthcoming, but at least for now you can start testing your forecasting in the sandbox, when FFPSA sandbox. And checking out particularly the percent complete, and see if you can come up with some scenarios where we have some negative percent complete. Everything's the same. Setting up assignments, approving time cards, all these fields are the same. You still need to click refresh EAC, which should happen when time cards are approved or assignments are changed automatically. But give it a try, and we can walk through some scenarios to make sure that the numbers are tying out. Thanks.